sitting here thinking, look, what? Dude, that's crazy, like crazy. Brothers and sisters, may the Lord give you his peace. Fr Malachy, great to be here with you again this week. And just have a question for you. Have you ever struggled to trust God? Something I've been pondering just in my own life in the midst of different moments of struggle, desolation. I guess asking that question really is like asking, are you human? Because like everybody, I think at some level experiences difficulties in trust, and certainly difficulties in trusting God. But I believe there's kind of one lie that's often one that shows up again and again, certainly in my life, and I find it also happens to be in Scripture too, that comes against that trust. And I want to talk about today, what is that lie that steals from our hearts the ability to be able to really trust in God and experience the peace that comes from that trust? There's a story of Martha and Mary, well known, right? You sort of have this like juxtaposition. Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus in this dinner that is happening in their home. Martha is preparing the meal, running around, frantic, getting everything ready, right? And as she's doing this, she comes up to Jesus and she looks at Jesus and she says, Jesus, do you not care that my sister Mary is sitting here doing nothing while I'm running around doing everything? And Jesus' response to her is like, you're anxious about a lot of things. And that question, right, do you not care? It also shows up at another point in the gospel when Jesus is out on the boat in the water of the Sea of Galilee with his boys. They're crossing, and Jesus goes and takes a nap. And while he's napping, this massive storm comes and starts throwing waves into the boat and wind, and the guys are freaking out. And even though they're fishermen, it's like they're not sure if they're going to make it through this one. And so all of a sudden they're going and they're shaking Jesus and they're waking him up and saying like, wake up. And then they say, do you not care that we're perishing? And just thinking about this, right? This do you not care is coming out of this lie, which is the lie that God doesn't care. That your suffering, that my suffering, that our struggles, that our difficulties are somehow something that he's indifferent to or doesn't particularly have time to be able to deal with. Even if he is interested, it's sort of like there's got to be somebody else out there who's worth helping before me. Whatever it is, right, that's there in our hearts, or this lie that like somehow God doesn't care, that God doesn't see me, that God doesn't know my situation. And now, first off, just to pause and say, hey, like if you feel that way, like totally like validate that, like that I feel like God doesn't care, like that's real. And there's real moments in our lives where that's exactly what we experience. I know I've experienced it in my life. And my life, not just sort of before I knew God, but as a friar, as a priest, have struggled in different moments of crisis, desolation, suffering in my family and people that I know and love and in my own life. And so it's like comes rising up this feeling like, God, do you really, like, do you care? Do you see? And yet there's this invitation to trust. And I can remember early on in my own vocation as a friar, I was a postulant. So that's the first time you enter the community and you're in a preparation for becoming a friar. You don't have the habit yet. You don't have the cool name, right? But you are living something of our life. And there's a moment in which you will receive the habit and you'll also receive this new name. That moment is called investiture, like investing, giving the new clothing, the new robe, right? These new digs. As I was preparing for this in my own life, I was struggling with something that was a real concrete situation, which was I had joined the Friars and I had all of these debts that I had beforehand that God provided in many ways to be able to pay off, except for one of them, which was my truck. I had an F-150, which I loved. Okay, Maggie was her name. You know, Maggie was not selling because the time when I entered the community was the fall of 2008, where there was this massive like housing, crisis, market crashing, all this economic stuff going on where no one was buying anything, which is totally shocking because trying to sell a truck in Georgia, right? It's like, come on, it should be like trying to sell a bottle of water in the Sahara, bro. Like we love trucks down in Georgia, but I couldn't sell this thing. And the days were getting closer, and I had put enough money in the bank to cover the 6 months of my postulancy. But as we drew nearer to the moment when I was going to become a novice, I was just not at peace with leaving behind this unpaid debt of this vehicle with my parents. And so I'm struggling inside. And I went and I talked to my postulant director. My postulant director tells me, I hear you, but I just think Jesus wants you to trust him. And I'm sitting here looking at him. I was like, hey, dude, I've got literally 1 month left worth of payment. and I'm entering the novitiate, which means that like now that's ending and there's not going to be anybody to pay the rest of the debt on this truck. And you're telling me just like trust in Jesus, it's like it hasn't sold yet. And he says, why don't you call your dad? So I call my dad and I explain the situation to him. And I didn't tell him what Father Luke had told me, which was like, I just feel like Jesus wants you to trust him. But I'm sitting here, I'm talking to my dad, and he responds after I've told him the situation and my struggle and my fear of like, I don't think I can go on in novitiate. I think I need to leave, work, pay off the rest of this truck, and then jump back in whenever that is. And he just says to me, he was like, son, I just feel like Jesus just wants you to trust him on this one. You know when investiture was? It was 1 week away. Every day as we're getting closer, I'm trying to trust. I'm trying not to believe this lie that wants to like rise up inside of me that God, even maybe these things that he had done for me, like at this point, he's kind of like done helping me. I'm kind of on my own. Or these lies that wanted to rise up that he doesn't really care. He doesn't see what this situation is that I'm dealing with, doesn't see my heart and its suffering and its anxiety about this, financial debt that's in front of me and not knowing how to deal with that. He doesn't see that. And so again, like this question of like, Lord, do you not care? Comes rising up in the midst of these moments. And these are moments that, right, like they happen to all of us. And God seems to let them happen to all of us. Or sometimes it's like, what the heck? I'm angry. I'm like, why are you letting this happen, Lord? Why wasn't my truck sold within a month of having put it out there on the market? Why was there a market crash at the same time I'm trying to dump this truck and can't find anybody to buy it? And as I was sitting there struggling with this, the day before my investiture, I receive a phone call in the morning unexpectedly from my dad. Now, because of my own family dynamics with addiction and things that we've struggled with over the years in my family, like an unexpected phone call was like something that just immediately triggered fear and anxiety. It's like, oh man, what's going on? What's happening? And I remember picking up the phone because in postulancy, by the way, parents can't just call their kids. There's this separation that begins to happen as you first join religious life. And so I go and I pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, Dad, how's it going? He was like, hey, son, how you doing? I'm just like, so he's happy. I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on, why he's calling me. He's like, hey, just wanted to call you. He's like, you remember the truck? I'm like, of course I remember the truck. That's what I've been thinking about all this week. Just praying God, what are you going to do? Help me to trust you. And he says, yeah, it was just wanted to call and let you know that this morning, Steve Swenson, he called and he asked me whether or not it was still for sale. And I said, yeah, sure, it's for sale. And all Malachy's asking for is for somebody to take over the rest of the payments for it because he just wants to get rid of the thing. He said, yeah, I'll take it. I'll be over later today. He said, because you know what? Last night I had a dream. And in this dream, Jesus told me I'm supposed to buy that truck. And I'm sitting here thinking, look, what? Dude, that's crazy, crazy. And in this moment of just experiencing in a tangible way, God's fidelity and the way that he saw something so small, if you think about the grand scheme of the world and all that's going on, so small. And to see just a creature, me, just one of his creatures, and that he looks on me with love, but the reality is he doesn't look on me with love, he looks on us with love, on you with love. And even in the storms, when he's napping and you're like, why are you napping, right? Even in those moments, his heart is turned towards you. His heart is turned towards me with love. And it's a moment we're being given a catechesis. We're being given an instruction on how to walk through the storms of life, the kind of trust that you can even lay down and take a nap. Now, don't get me wrong. I still struggle with trust. But there's an invitation, and the lie that's underneath there that God doesn't care so often comes trying to attack our hearts and steal our ability to trust in him. And this is precisely why Jesus comes, because he knows that lie is so deep in us that we're going to need something that's going to be a radical sign. It's going to be something that's visible, tangible, that we're going to be able to behold and look at and know that actually, you know what? God has not forgotten, and God does care. He cares so much about you that he said, hey, I want my son to die for you. This is the gospel. And not for you when you get it all together and you're perfect, but for you when you're still a hot mess and maybe totally living in all kinds of sin and disordered behavior. He gave his son for you. He cares. And he invites us to step into this trust. There's this beautiful proverb, Proverbs 3:5. It's well known. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all of your ways, and he will direct your path. And that those disciples in the boat are being taught, oh, you have little faith. What is faith? Faith is belief in the trustworthiness of God's promises. His promise is he's with you always, even to the end of time. His promise is that his grace is enough. There's a strength and a power in his love. And it's for you and it's for me. Whatever we might be facing, right? Could be a small just moment of inconvenience and difficulty in my day, but it also could be a significant challenge to my faith, a real cross, a suffering, a difficulty, a seemingly unsolvable situation that I'm standing in front of. And I think the Lord's calling us, he's inviting us as he calls us to follow after him. He's calling us, he's saying, you know what? I think Jesus is asking you to trust him. He's asking all of us to trust him. So let's renounce that lie that God doesn't care. And let's live in the peace and the freedom from that anxiety that can ravage our hearts and minds, the freedom that comes from trusting in the love that he has for us and experiencing his presence, his faithfulness, his power to come into our lives and make all things new. Brothers and sisters, let's keep walking on the way, following Jesus as he leads us and teaches us what it means to live as children of the Father as we're on our way home to his house, Abba's house in heaven. God bless.